Forest Ranger David Mitchell had strict rules about fog in the Appalachian wilderness. Never follow animals into zero visibility conditions, never leave the trail, never go in alone. But when an injured wild foal stumbled out of the fog bank, looked directly at him, then limped back into the white void, David broke every rule he'd ever made. What happened in the next 60 seconds would haunt him for the rest of his life. Because what emerged from that fog behind the foal wasn't another horse. It wasn't a bear or a mountain lion. It was something David had never seen in 20 years of wilderness work, something that explained the foal's terror, the empty forest, and the eerie silence that had fallen over the mountains. This isn't just a rescue story. This is a survival story. Before we reveal what was hunting in that fog, if you love intense, edge-of-your-seat true wilderness stories, subscribe now and smash that notification bell. You will not believe what happens next. David Mitchell had been a forest ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 20 years, and he'd learned to read the forest like other people read books. Every sound, every movement, every change in animal behavior told a story. And on this particular October morning, the forest was telling him something was very, very wrong. The silence was the first thing he noticed. Not the peaceful quiet of a calm morning, but an oppressive, unnatural silence. No birds singing. No squirrels chattering. No insects buzzing. Just nothing. The kind of silence that happens when every creature in the forest is hiding from a predator. David had started his patrol at 6:30 a.m. from the Cades Cove Ranger Station, following the routine trail check he'd done thousands of times before. But by 8 a.m., when he reached the higher elevations near Rich Mountain, the fog had rolled in, thick, dense, impenetrable fog that reduced visibility to maybe 15 feet. Fog wasn't unusual in the Smokies. The mountains were famous for it. But this fog felt different. Heavier. Almost malevolent. And combined with that unnatural silence, David's instincts were screaming at him to turn back. He was about to do exactly that when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the silent forest. Hoofbeats. Uneven, stumbling hoofbeats coming from somewhere in the fog ahead. David froze, his hand instinctively moving to the radio on his belt. The hoofbeats grew closer, and then a shape materialized out of the white void. A foal. A wild Mustang foal, probably 6 or 7 months old, with a dark chestnut coat that was slick with sweat despite the cool morning air. The young horse was limping badly, favoring its right front leg. Its sides were heaving with exertion and fear. Its eyes were wide, showing white all around, the classic expression of a terrified horse. And it was alone. Wild foals didn't travel alone. They stayed with their mothers, with their family bands. A solitary foal meant something had separated it from its herd, and given the terror evident in this animal's behavior, that something was still a threat. The foal stopped about 10 feet from David, standing in the middle of the trail. It stared at him with those terrified eyes, breathing hard. David slowly raised his hands, palms out, making himself non-threatening. Easy, baby. Easy. What happened to you? Where's your family? The foal took a step toward him, and David noticed more details. The limp was from a deep laceration on the right front leg, not life-threatening but painful enough to slow the young horse down. There were also scratches along its flanks and hindquarters, as if it had been running through thick brush at full speed. But the most disturbing detail was what David saw when the foal turned slightly. On its left hip was a mark David recognized from his wildlife training: claw marks. 4 parallel scratches, each about 3 inches long, cutting through the hair and leaving shallow wounds in the skin. Something had attacked this foal. Something with claws. Something the foal had barely escaped from. David's mind raced through possibilities. Black bears? They had claws and were common in the Smokies, but they rarely attacked healthy horses and typically avoided confrontation. Mountain lions? They'd been extinct in the region for decades, though occasional rumors of sightings persisted. The foal suddenly turned, looking back into the fog from where it had emerged. Its ears pinned flat against its head, nostrils flaring. Every muscle in its body tensed. It was still afraid. More than afraid, terrified. And whatever it was afraid of was still out there. Then the foal did something that sent chills down David's spine. It looked back at him, took several limping steps toward the fog, stopped and looked back again. The message was unmistakable, impossible but crystal clear. Follow me. There's something you need to see. Every instinct David had developed over 20 years of wilderness work screamed at him not to follow that foal into zero visibility fog. He grabbed his radio. This is Ranger Mitchell, checking in from Rich Mountain Trail, mile marker 4.7. I have heavy fog conditions and I've encountered an injured wild foal showing signs of predator attack. The animal appears to be trying to lead me somewhere. I'm going to investigate but wanted my position on record. The response crackled back. Copy that, Mitchell. Be advised we've had 3 separate calls this morning from hikers reporting unusual animal behavior in your area. Deer running in panic, birds abandoning nests. Something's got the wildlife spooked. Recommend extreme caution. Understood. We'll report back in 30 minutes. David pulled out his GPS tracker, turned on his emergency beacon, and checked his bear spray, though he suspected that whatever had attacked this foal, bear spray might not be enough. Then he made a decision that would change everything. He followed the foal into the fog. The young horse limped ahead of him, moving slowly enough that David could keep pace, but with clear purpose. It knew where it was going. Every few steps, it would look back to make sure David was still following, then continue deeper into the white void. Visibility was less than 10 feet now. The fog was so thick that David could barely see the trail beneath his feet. Sound was muffled, distorted. His sense of direction was completely gone. If the foal abandoned him out here, he'd be disoriented and lost within minutes. They'd been walking for maybe 5 minutes, though time felt warped in the fog, when David began to hear something. A sound so faint at first that he thought he was imagining it. But as they continued forward, it grew louder, more distinct. Whinnying. Multiple horses whinnying, not the casual communication sounds of a grazing herd, but distress calls. Panic calls. The sounds horses make when they're trapped or threatened. The foal heard it too and increased its pace despite the limp, pushing through obvious pain to move faster. David's heart was pounding now. What the hell was out here? Then the fog thinned slightly, just enough for David to make out shapes ahead. Large shapes. He could see dark forms, movement, and as he drew closer, the scene before him became horrifyingly clear. It was a wild Mustang herd, approximately 15 horses including mares, foals, and 1 stallion. But they weren't running free across mountain meadows like wild horses should. They were trapped. Cornered in a natural box canyon formation, pressed together in a tight, defensive circle with the foals protected in the center and the adults facing outward, ready to kick at any threat. The herd was terrified. Covered in sweat, sides heaving, eyes wild. Several showed fresh wounds, scratches, bite marks, torn skin. They'd been under attack. Recently. And whatever had attacked them might still be nearby. David's blood ran cold as he processed the scene. This wasn't normal predator behavior. Even a mountain lion, if one was somehow in the area, would take down a single vulnerable animal and retreat. It wouldn't systematically attack and corner an entire herd. This was something else. Something wrong. The injured foal limped toward the herd, whinnying. The adult horses responded with urgent calls, clearly recognizing the young one. But they didn't break formation. They remained in their defensive circle, facing outward. Facing toward the fog. Waiting for whatever was out there to come back. And then David heard it. A sound that made every hair on his body stand up. A sound that didn't belong in the Appalachian wilderness. A growl. Low, rumbling, and massive. Not a bear. Not a mountain lion. Something bigger. David's hand flew to his radio. This is Mitchell. I need immediate backup at my GPS coordinates. I have a wild horse herd under attack by an unknown large predator. Repeat, unknown large predator. I need wildlife specialists and armed backup now. Mitchell, can you identify the predator species? Negative. I haven't seen it yet. But based on the herd's behavior and the sounds I'm hearing, this is something big. Really big. Copy. Backup en route. ETA 25 minutes. Mitchell, do not engage. Observe only. 25 minutes might as well have been 25 hours. David unholstered his service pistol with one hand while holding his bear spray in the other, his eyes scanning the fog for any sign of movement. The growl came again from a different direction this time. The herd shifted nervously, the stallion pawing the ground and snorting, the aggressive display of a male protecting his family. But David could see fear in that stallion's eyes. Whatever was out there, even a full-grown wild stallion was afraid of it. Then the fog shifted and David saw it. At first just a shape, massive, low to the ground, moving with predatory grace through the white mist. Then more detail, dark fur, massive shoulders, a head that seemed too large for even its considerable body. David's mind refused to process what his eyes were seeing. It was impossible. Completely impossible. But there was no denying what stood at the edge of the fog, less than 50 feet away. It was a bear. But not like any bear David had ever seen or studied. This animal was enormous, easily 800 pounds, maybe more. Its coat was dark brown to black, shaggy and thick. Its head was massive, with a pronounced forehead and muzzle that seemed almost prehistoric. And its behavior was all wrong. Black bears were shy, avoided confrontation, rarely attacked large animals. This bear was hunting. Systematically. Intelligently. But it was the eyes that truly terrified David. When the bear looked directly at him, he saw an intelligence there that seemed almost human. This wasn't an animal acting on instinct. This was a predator assessing, calculating, planning. The bear growled again, that deep, resonant sound that vibrated through David's chest. The horses screamed in response, the stallion rearing up, striking the air with his front hooves in warning. David's mind raced through his training. Make yourself big. Make noise. Back away slowly. Never run. But all of that advice was for dealing with a normal black bear, not whatever this was. Hey, get back. David shouted, raising his arms, trying to appear larger and more threatening. His voice sounded small and weak in the fog-dampened air. The bear's gaze shifted from the horses to David. It took one step forward. Then another. It wasn't retreating. It wasn't intimidated. If anything, David's challenge had simply redirected its attention from the horses to him. David raised his bear spray, his hand trembling. The canister felt pathetically inadequate against this massive predator. His pistol, a 9mm service weapon, might as well have been a toy. You didn't stop an 800-pound bear with a 9mm unless you were incredibly lucky or incredibly skilled, and David was neither. The bear took another step forward, now less than 40 feet away. David could see its breath in the cool air, could see the muscles rippling under its thick fur, could see old scars on its face suggesting this animal had been in fights before and won. This was it. This was how David Mitchell was going to die, alone in the fog trying to protect a herd of wild horses from a predator that shouldn't exist. But then something remarkable happened. The injured foal, the one that had led David here, stepped out from behind him and positioned itself between David and the bear. David's heart nearly stopped. No. Get back. The foal stood on trembling legs, clearly terrified but refusing to move. It positioned its small body between the massive predator and the human who had followed it into the fog. The young horse was trying to protect him. The bear paused, confused by this behavior. In its experience, prey ran. They didn't stand their ground. They didn't protect others. This was unexpected. That moment of hesitation was all the herd stallion needed. The large male horse charged out from the defensive circle with a scream that echoed through the fog, a war cry that wild stallions use when defending their families. He was magnificent and terrifying, nearly 900 pounds of muscle and fury, running straight at the bear. The bear rose up on its hind legs, standing nearly 8 feet tall, and roared, a sound that was primal, ancient, and absolutely bone-chilling. For a frozen moment, the two massive animals faced each other. Wild stallion versus giant bear, neither willing to back down. Then they collided. The impact was tremendous. The stallion reared and struck with his front hooves, massive blows that would crush bone. The bear swiped with claws as long as fingers, trying to hook the horse's legs or neck. They circled, struck, withdrew, struck again. David knew he had to do something. The stallion was brave, but he couldn't win this fight. The bear was too big, too powerful, too well armed with claws and teeth. It was only a matter of time before those claws found something vital. Hey, over here. David fired his pistol into the air, 3 shots in rapid succession. The sound was deafening, echoing through the mountains. The bear dropped to all fours and turned toward this new threat. David fired 3 more shots into the ground near the bear's position, not trying to hit it but trying to create enough noise and chaos to break its attack focus. It worked. The bear hesitated, suddenly faced with multiple threats, an aggressive stallion behind it, a noise-making human in front of it, and a herd of horses that might stampede at any moment. The predator's calculation changed. This wasn't worth it. Too much risk. Too much unknown. The bear let out one final roar, more frustration than threat, then turned and disappeared back into the fog. The speed with which such a massive animal could move was shocking. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, as if the fog had swallowed it whole. But David knew it wasn't gone. Not really. It was out there, just beyond visibility, watching, waiting. Bears didn't give up easily, especially one that had been actively hunting. It would circle. It would wait for an opportunity. The stallion limped back to the herd, blood visible on his shoulder where the bear's claws had connected. The horses immediately closed around him, checking him, offering comfort through touch and sound. The injured foal rejoined the herd, finally safe within the protection of its family. David's radio crackled. "Mitchell, we heard shots fired." Report your status. I'm okay. I've engaged with the predator. It's a bear, but not like any black bear I've ever seen. Massive, aggressive, actively hunting the wild horse herd. I've temporarily driven it off, but it's still in the area. How far out is backup? 15 minutes. Can you hold position? David looked at the terrified herd, at the injured stallion still ready to fight, at the foal that had led him here. Negative. This herd needs to get out of this fog, out of this canyon. I'm going to try to lead them to open ground where they can run if the bear comes back. Mitchell, you're not trained for. I don't care. These animals saved my life. I'm not leaving them. Leading a wild horse herd through heavy fog while a massive predator stalked nearby was something no ranger training manual had ever covered. But David didn't have a choice. The horses were trapped in this box canyon. If the bear came back, and David was certain it would, the herd would be cornered with nowhere to run. The problem was getting wild, terrified horses to trust a human enough to follow him. Normally, wild mustangs avoided human contact. But these horses were desperate, and the injured foal had already created an unusual bridge between David and the herd. David approached slowly, speaking in a low, calm voice. Easy, everyone. Easy. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we need to get out of here. Follow me. Trust me. The foal limped toward David again as if understanding his words. The young horse positioned itself near David's side, not close enough to touch, but close enough to signal to the other horses. This human is safe. This human helped us. The injured stallion watched David with wary but intelligent eyes. The big horse was assessing, deciding. Finally, he snorted and tossed his head, not aggressive but acknowledging. It was the closest thing to permission David was going to get. Okay, here we go. David began walking back the way he'd come, the injured foal limping beside him. He didn't look back, didn't try to herd the horses, didn't make any aggressive movements. He just walked, calm and steady, as if he had every confidence the horses would follow. And they did. First one mare, then another, then the whole herd began moving, following David and the foal. The stallion brought up the rear, constantly looking back, constantly alert for the bear's return. They'd covered maybe 100 yards when David heard it again, that low growl somewhere in the fog to their right. The bear was tracking them, following parallel to their path. The horses heard it too, their pace quickening despite their exhaustion and injuries. Stay together, David called to the horses, knowing they couldn't understand his words but hoping his tone conveyed calmness. Keep moving. We're almost out of the canyon. Another growl, closer now, on the left this time. The bear was circling, looking for an opening. David's empty pistol was useless. He'd fired all his rounds driving off the initial attack. His bear spray was ready, but effective range was only about 20 feet. If the bear charged from the fog, he'd have maybe 2 seconds to react. The foal pressed closer to David, trembling but still moving forward. The young horse's trust in this human was absolute, instinctive. David felt the weight of that trust like a physical thing. He couldn't let these animals down. Then the fog began to thin. Just slightly at first, visibility increasing from 10 feet to 20, then 30. They were moving out of the dense fog bank that had trapped them. Ahead, David could see the edge of the canyon opening up into a larger meadow, open ground where the horses could run if needed. Come on, almost there. Just a little further. A roar from behind them. The bear, realizing its prey was escaping. The sound of something large crashing through brush, moving fast. Run! David shouted, breaking into a sprint. The horses needed no encouragement. The entire herd bolted, even the injured ones finding reserves of speed driven by pure survival instinct. David ran with them, his lungs burning, his legs pumping. He could hear the bear behind them, could feel its presence like a cold shadow. 50 yards to the meadow. 40. 30. They burst out of the fog into clear morning sunlight. The sudden brightness was disorienting, but beautiful. The meadow stretched before them, open, safe, defensible. The horses didn't stop running until they'd covered another 100 yards, finally pausing at the far edge of the meadow, sides heaving, still alert but no longer trapped. David turned back toward the fog line, bear spray raised, ready for the bear to emerge. But it didn't come. The massive predator had stopped at the edge of the fog, reluctant to leave its cover and expose itself in open ground. David caught just a glimpse of its dark shape in the white mist, and then it was gone, melting back into the forest. Backup arrived 10 minutes later. 2 rangers, 3 wildlife specialists, and a veterinarian named Dr. Sarah Chin who specialized in wild horse medicine. David was sitting on the ground, shaking from adrenaline crash, while the wild horse herd grazed nervously in the meadow about 100 yards away. David, are you injured? Dr. Chin asked, immediately going into medical assessment mode. No. Just, give me a minute. David's hands were still trembling. The magnitude of what had just happened was finally sinking in. One of the wildlife specialists, a man named Tom Berkeley with 30 years of experience, was glassing the fog line with binoculars. I don't see anything. You're absolutely sure it was a bear? I know what I saw, Tom. It was a bear. But not like any black bear on record. It was huge, maybe 800 pounds. And its behavior was completely wrong. It was actively hunting a wild horse herd. Systematically. Intelligently. Tom exchanged glances with the other specialists. David, you know how this sounds? There haven't been grizzly bears in the Smokies in over 100 years. I didn't say it was a grizzly. I don't know what it was. But I know what I saw, and so do those horses. Dr. Chin had moved closer to the herd, documenting injuries from a distance through a telephoto lens. He's right about one thing. These horses have been attacked. I'm seeing claw marks, bite wounds, and signs of severe stress. Something big went after this herd. Over the next 2 hours, the team documented everything. Injuries on the horses, claw marks on trees where the bear had marked territory, tracks in the soft ground where the fog had deposited moisture. The tracks were enormous, far larger than a black bear's, with claw marks that extended inches beyond the pad prints. These tracks. Tom's voice was quiet, uncertain. These look like grizzly tracks. But that's impossible. Is it? David asked. Climate change is driving animals into new territories. Grizzlies have been expanding their range in the Rockies. Maybe one dispersed this far east. Or maybe there's been a remnant population in the most remote areas that we simply never documented. The possibility hung in the air, revolutionary and frightening. A grizzly bear in the Appalachians would rewrite everything they knew about the region's ecosystem. The injured foal had stayed closer to the team than the other horses, as if recognizing that humans, or at least this particular human, represented safety. Dr. Chin managed to get close enough to treat the leg wound with long-acting antibiotics delivered via dart. The young horse would heal. As the day wore on and the fog lifted completely, the wild herd gradually moved away, returning to the wilderness. But several times, horses looked back at David, the stallion, several maras, and especially the young foal that had led him into danger to save its family. 3 weeks later, a trail camera placed near the Box Canyon captured an image that made national news. A massive bear, far larger than any black bear should be, with physical characteristics that suggested grizzly genetics. DNA analysis of hair samples collected from the site confirmed it. Somehow, impossibly, a grizzly bear was living in the Great Smoky Mountains. Wildlife experts theorized it might be a descendant of remnant populations that survived in the most remote areas, or possibly a long-range disperser from Western populations. Either way, it represented a significant discovery and raised important questions about rewilding, ecosystem restoration, and how much of the natural world remained unknown even in well-studied areas. David continued his ranger work, but he never looked at the forest the same way. He'd learned that wilderness still held mysteries, that animals were capable of remarkable intelligence and bravery, and that sometimes the line between wild and domestic, predator and protector, was more blurred than anyone imagined. 6 months after the incident, David was hiking the same trail, though never again in heavy fog, when he spotted a familiar shape in a distant meadow. A young horse, no longer limping, now strong and healthy, grazing with its herd. The foal looked up, saw David, and for a long moment, they regarded each other across the distance. Then the young horse tossed its head, a gesture that somehow conveyed recognition, gratitude, and goodbye, and returned to grazing. David smiled, tears in his eyes. You're welcome, little one. Stay safe out there. The foal had led him into danger to save its family. In doing so, it had revealed a predator that science thought was extinct in the region, had demonstrated remarkable intelligence and bravery, and had reminded David why he'd dedicated his life to protecting wilderness. Some stories sound too incredible to be true. But sometimes, in the fog-shrouded mountains where wild things still roam free, the incredible becomes reality. The grizzly bear, now known as Ghost, for its ability to disappear into the fog, has been documented several times since this incident and is being monitored by wildlife officials. The wild horse herd continues to thrive in the Smokies. David Mitchell received the National Park Service's Valor Award for his actions that day. The injured foal, identified by its distinctive markings, has grown into a strong young horse and was recently spotted with a foal of its own. If this incredible true story of wilderness mystery, animal intelligence, and survival against impossible odds moved you, Please subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary animal stories. Smash that like button, share this video to spread awareness about the amazing wildlife still hidden in our wilderness areas, and tell us in the comments. Do you believe there are still unknown or extinct animals living in remote wilderness? Thanks for watching, and remember, the wild places still hold mysteries we're only beginning to understand, and sometimes the smallest act of bravery can reveal the biggest secrets.